Beloved, today we gather to celebrate a birthday unlike any other. It is the nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the chosen vessel, the Holy Mother, who carried salvation within her womb. When God looked into the brokenness of this world, he ordained a woman, pure and faithful, to bring forth the light that would shatter darkness. Her birth was not just another moment in history. It was the dawn of a divine plan. Just as dawn breaks after the long night, so the birth of Mary became the prelude to redemption. This is not just her story. It is a prophetic reminder of how God prepares the way before he reveals his glory. When we look at the nativity of Mary, one truth stands out with power. God always prepares before he performs. Her birth was not random, nor was it just another child entering the world. It was God laying the groundwork for the greatest act of redemption ever witnessed. Long before Jesus cried his first cry in Bethlehem, God had already chosen, shaped, and prepared Mary to be the vessel for his son. That tells us something vital. Before the promise comes to pass, God works in the background, arranging details, aligning people, and preparing hearts. Sometimes we feel like nothing is happening, like our prayers hang unanswered in the air. But often, it is simply our season of preparation. The unseen work of God is every bit as important as the visible miracle. Think of a farmer. Before harvest, he tills the soil, removes stones, and plants seed. For weeks or months, there is no fruit in sight, yet every hidden action is essential to the future crop. If the farmer despised that preparation season, there would never be a harvest to gather. In the same way, your hidden years, your quiet prayers, your unnoticed obedience, all of it is God's way of preparing the soil of your life for his great performance. A short example illustrates this well. Consider Joseph in the Old Testament. He was given a dream of greatness, but before it ever came to pass, he endured betrayal, slavery, and prison. It looked like delay, but in reality, God was preparing him for a stage that required maturity and wisdom. Without that preparation, he would not have been ready to lead Egypt. In the same way, Mary's birth preceded the Savior's arrival. And your preparation today is proof that God's performance is on its way. Humility is the womb of greatness, because true elevation in God's kingdom is never built on pride, but on surrender. Mary's life demonstrates this with striking clarity. She did not come from wealth, power, or a place of influence. She lived in Nazareth, a town people dismissed as insignificant. Yet, in her humility, she became the chosen vessel to carry the Savior of the world. Her greatness was not in what she possessed, but in her willingness to bow before God's will. When the angel told her she would bear a child, she did not exalt herself, but simply said, "Be it unto me according to your word." That response reveals the power of humility, choosing obedience over ambition, surrender over self-promotion. In our world, people often chase recognition, titles, and applause, believing that is the path to greatness. But God looks for a heart that is humble, one that does not need the spotlight, but is willing to serve in the shadows until he calls them forth. Humility creates the space where God can pour his glory because it acknowledges that the power is his, not ours. An excellent example is David before he became king. While his brothers stood in the house awaiting Samuel's blessing, David was out in the fields tending sheep. He was overlooked, forgotten, even dismissed. But his humility in serving faithfully in a lowly place prepared him for the throne. God exalted him because he first proved himself in obscurity. Mary and David both remind us that humility is not weakness. It is strength under God's control. It is the soil where greatness grows. If you remain humble, God himself will lift you to heights you could never reach on your own. Purity opens doors to divine assignment because God entrusts his holiest purposes to vessels that are clean before him. Mary was not only pure in body, but also pure in heart, set apart in her devotion to God. In a world full of corruption and compromise, her consecration made her the right vessel to carry the Son of God. Purity is more than moral behavior. It is about alignment with God's will, where the heart refuses to be polluted by pride, greed, or sin. When purity guards your life, it makes you trustworthy in heaven's eyes because God knows you will not distort his assignment for selfish gain. Many people desire to be used by God, but they overlook the necessity of purity. Talent may open doors before men, but purity opens doors before heaven. When you live with integrity, keeping your spirit undefiled, you attract God's favor and positioning. Purity clears the channel so God's voice can be heard clearly and his power can flow freely through you. A strong example is the story of Daniel when taken captive into Babylon. Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the king's food and wine. Though it seemed like a small choice, that act of purity set the trajectory for his divine assignment. God gave him wisdom, favor, and the ability to interpret dreams that kings could not understand. His purity positioned him to influence nations and to stand as a mouthpiece of heaven in a pagan land. In the same way, Mary's purity was the gateway to her calling. Purity is not about perfection, but about consecration, choosing God above everything else. When you walk in purity, heaven can place in your hands assignments that will shape eternity. Every birth is a prophecy of destiny because no life enters the world without divine intention. The moment Mary was born, prophecy moved closer to fulfillment. Her birth was not ordinary. It carried within it the promise of a Savior yet to come. Long before she ever heard the angel's voice, her very existence was proof that God was preparing the world for redemption. In the same way, your birth is not an accident, a coincidence, or a random event. It is heaven's declaration that there is a purpose on earth only you can fulfill. So often people look at their lives and question their worth, wondering if they matter. But the truth is, the moment you drew your first breath, you stepped into a story already written by the author of life. Your birth itself was a sign that God had work prepared for you that your destiny was tied to something greater than yourself. An excellent example of this is the birth of John the Baptist. Before he was even conceived, the angel Gabriel told his father Zechariah that this child would prepare the way for the Lord. John's birth was a prophecy in motion. From the moment he entered the world, his life was connected to his calling to be a voice crying in the wilderness, making straight the path for Christ. Just as Mary's birth pointed to the coming Savior, and John's birth pointed to the preparation of his ministry, your birth points to a purpose only you can carry. Every life is a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. To recognize this truth is to embrace the fact that you were born with intention, born with design, and born to release something heaven placed within you. God turns ordinary vessels into extraordinary instruments because his power is not limited by human background, education, or status. Mary was a simple young girl from Nazareth, a town considered insignificant in her time. There was nothing about her position in society that suggested greatness. Yet God chose her to carry the greatest assignment in history, the birth of his Son. This truth reminds us that God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. He delights in using ordinary people so that his glory, not human strength, is revealed through their lives. When we feel small, overlooked, or inadequate, that is often when God's power is best displayed. He is not searching for perfection, but for availability. An ordinary vessel in his hands becomes an extraordinary tool of transformation. What seems weak to the world becomes mighty when touched by the Spirit of God. A powerful example of this is Gideon. When God called him, he was hiding in fear, threshing wheat in secret. He even argued with God, saying he was the least in his family, and his family was the least in Israel. Yet God called him Almighty Man of Valor and raised him up to deliver Israel with only 300 men against a vast army. Gideon's story shows us that what looks ordinary in human eyes can become extraordinary when surrendered to God's plan. Mary and Gideon both prove that the question is never whether we are enough. It is whether we are willing. When ordinary people say yes to God, their lives become instruments that change generations. If he could take a girl from Nazareth and a fearful man from Israel and turn them into world changers, then he can surely take your ordinary and make it extraordinary. Beloved, as we sing this birthday hymn in our hearts, let us remember that Mary's nativity is more than history. It is prophecy fulfilled and prophecy yet unfolding. Her life reminds us that God still chooses, God still raises, and God still uses ordinary people to bring extraordinary light into this world. So lift your heads, rejoice, and walk boldly. Just as the birth of Mary signaled the coming of Christ, your life may be the very signal that God is about to move mightily in your family, your community, your generation. True celebration is not about the person alone, but about the purpose they carried. When we celebrate the nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we are not merely honoring her birth as a child entering the world. We are rejoicing in the divine purpose attached to her life, the coming of Christ through her. Her birth became meaningful because of the mission she carried within her. Likewise, in our own lives, the most powerful moments are not about us receiving applause or recognition, but about whether what we do points to God's greater plan. Personality fades, but purpose endures. Too often, we mistake celebration for the glorification of individuals. People may be admired for their talent, beauty, or success, but unless their lives connect to something eternal, the celebration ends as quickly as the applause. Mary reminds us that a true life worth celebrating is one anchored in God's assignment. She was not praised because of wealth or worldly status. She was celebrated because she became the vessel through which salvation entered the world. A strong example of this is the life of Moses. When Israel celebrated his leadership, the true reason was not Moses himself, but the purpose God fulfilled through him, delivering his people from slavery. Moses was an instrument, but the real focus was on God's plan of freedom for his people. Even Moses understood this, pointing Israel's eyes to God rather than to himself. In the same way, every celebration of our lives should point beyond us to the purpose we were born to carry. When people honor your life, let it not end with your name, but with the God who authored your assignment. Purpose is greater than personality, and that is what makes a life truly worth celebrating. Today, we celebrate not just a birth, but a beginning. The Nativity of Mary reminds us that every beginning in God has eternal significance. May her life inspire us to live humbly, walk purely, and embrace the destiny God has written over us. Her birthday hymn is not just her song, it can become ours too, a melody of surrender, obedience, and divine purpose.